So every year, the NBA Draft Combine gives prospects the ability to showcase their skills and change their draft stock, and now that this year's Combine is officially over, I wanted to go over my biggest winners and losers. So let's jump into it. And the first winner I want to talk about might be the biggest, and that's Cameron Carr from Baylor. And from what he showcased during the Combine, Carr might have been the biggest stock riser out of all of the prospects that were there. Coming into it, Carr had already had first-round buzz because of the shooting profile, the athletic tools, and the defensive flashes that he's shown previously. But then he went out in a live scrimmage and was absolutely dominant and looked like by far the best player on the floor. He dropped 30 points, made 6 threes, and also threw down 3 dunks and showed that he is more than just a catch-and-shoot type of player. We saw a wing who can separate, rise up over defenders, and finish above the rim, and his measurements were good as well, as he measured in at 6'4.5" without shoes, with nearly a 7'1" wingspan, and add in a 42.5-inch max vertical and elite agility testing, and now Carr looks like a real mid-first round lock and could even find himself in the back end of the lottery. But another one of my big winners from the Combine is Morez Johnson Jr. from Michigan, and this is where the Combine confirmed what his tape from college already showed, and that's that Johnson is just physically ready for the next level. He has the size, strength, length, and movement skills that NBA teams want in a modern frontcourt player, and his measurements were compared to guys like Naz Reid, Wendell Carter Jr., and Bobby Portis, and that immediately grabs my attention. But the difference for Morez Johnson Jr. is that he's also a much more functional athlete. He posted a 39-inch max vertical and had the second fastest pro lane time, which is ridiculous for a player with his size and build. And then he went into the shooting drills and hit 17 of 25 threes in one of them, which is a huge development after he barely took threes during the season at Michigan. And if teams are going to buy that type of shooting, he could go somewhere between picks 10 and 15 in my opinion. And right after Morez, I got his former college teammate Aday Mara, who is also at Michigan, and he's one of my other winners. And this one is pretty simple because some players measure well, and Aday Mara measured like a video game character at the Combine. He came in at 7'3" barefoot, 260 pounds, with a 7'6" wingspan and a 9'9" standing reach, which is tied for the second longest standing reach in NBA Combine history. And when a player has that kind of size, every team has to at least stop and think about the upside that he could bring. But Mara isn't just tall, he also has real passing feel, touch around the basket, post skills, and obvious rim protection that comes with him. He had a 12% block rate, which shows how disruptive he can be defensively. And with Zach Edey and Donovan Clean proving huge centers can still work in the NBA recently, Mara's stock feels like it is rising fast, and I could see the Clippers at number 5 taking a look at Mara, and then Atlanta at number 8 feels like another potential landing spot. But my first loser from the NBA Draft Combine has to be Koa Peat from Arizona, and Pete might still be a first-round pick if he decides to stay in the draft, but the Combine did not answer the biggest question that we had. It actually made it louder, and that is Pete's shooting and his positional fit, because he measured in at just 6'7" without shoes, which puts him in a difficult middle ground there around the 3 or the 4 spot, and he is not quite big enough to be a full-time frontcourt player, but he has also proven that he cannot stretch the floor like a wing, and the shooting drills reminded us of that. He went 6 for 25 on spot-up threes, 7 for 25 in the star drill, and 10 for 25 on mid-range shots. And I know Koa Peat is a strong athlete and was extremely productive as a freshman at Arizona, especially during March Madness, but I'm starting to think it would be better if he decided to return to school and try and fix his jumper, because we know that next year's draft class isn't as stacked, and if he did just that, he could be a top 5 pick next year. But jumping back into some winners, the next one I have is Darius Acuff Jr. from Arkansas, and the biggest question with Acuff was always going to be his size, because teams knew the shot creation was real, they knew the scoring ability was real, but for a guard who is going to be asked to run an offense at an NBA level, the measurements mattered a lot, and Acuff came in at 6'2" barefoot, nearly 186 pounds, with a 6'7" wingspan, and that is a really encouraging result. In fact, those numbers are very similar to Damian Lillard's combine measurements back in 2012, and that doesn't mean that Acuff is Damian Lillard, but it does mean that teams are probably not going to make his size as big of a red flag as what we originally thought. And if the top 4 goes as expected with Dybantsa, Peterson, Boozer, and Wilson, I do think that Acuff could absolutely be in play for the Clippers at 5 or the Nets at 6. And I have another top guard as my next winner, and that's Kingston Flemings from Houston. And he helped himself because he looked like one of the most complete guards coming into the NBA draft combine. Now, his measurements were not amazing, and his wingspan was one of the smaller ones among top guards, so he definitely needed to win in other areas, but that's exactly what he did during the testing. Flemings led the combine in the three-point star drill by making 19 of 25 shots, and he also hit 15 of 25 spot-up threes, which reassures teams that the jumper is real. But it wasn't just his shooting that was impressive. He finished top 5 in the max vertical, pro lane agility, shuttle run, and sprint time, and that is the type of all-around testing profile that matches the scouting report that we had on Flemings. And he may not have the loudest upside, but he looks fast, skilled, athletic, and dependable, and that is definitely a lottery level combination and makes him one of the top guards in this class. And I also have Brayden Burries from Arizona as one of my other winners, and he has done enough, in my opinion, to lock himself into the top 10 of this draft. And the appeal with Burries is pretty easy to understand, as he has a strong guard with size, athleticism, and shooting touch. And at the combine, he measured nearly 6'4" without shoes and weighed 215 pounds, which is a really solid size for a young guard. Then he backed it up in the drills as well, as he hit nearly 61% of his threes and also tested extremely well in the pro lane drill and posted a 35-inch no-step vertical. And when a guard has that kind of strength, shot making, and athletic testing, it becomes difficult for lottery teams to pass on him, and Burries now feels like one of these safer guards in this range, and I can't see a world where he gets past Milwaukee at number 10. But that brings us to my next loser, which is Keaton Wagler from Illinois, and this one you might not have expected. I still think Wagler is a really good prospect, and he has positional size. He can shoot off the dribble, he takes care of the ball, and he helped lead Illinois to the Final Four. But the combine exposed some of the physical questions that I had. He measured with only a 6'6" and a quarter wingspan, which is underwhelming for a bigger guard like Wagler. And because he already had questions about explosiveness, that lack of length matters to me. He had 0 dunks this season and a low steal rate, so teams are not suddenly going to view him as a high-end athlete just because he posted a solid 36-inch max vertical. But the bigger issue to me and why I had him as a loser is that Acuff, Flemings, and Burries all had great combines, and there's a chance that those guards might have passed him on NBA teams' big boards. But my next winner is actually AJ Dybantsa from BYU, and this one is important because he was being compared directly to other elite prospects at the top of this class, like Darren Peterson and Cameron Boozer coming into the combine. But I think Dybantsa may have helped himself the most because the athletic testing backed up the idea that he is a very special physical prospect. He measured over 6'8" without shoes, posted a 42-inch max vertical, and also had a 33.5-inch no-step vertical. And those are big time numbers for a wing with his type of scoring upside. He also made 23 of 30 off the dribble threes, which is a massive number when teams are projecting self-creation for him at the next level. And the race at the top is still close, but I think in this draft combine, Dybantsa reminded everyone why his ceiling is so high and may have solidified himself as the number 1 pick in this draft. Now my next loser is Amari Allen from Alabama, and this is a measurement issue more than anything else. Allen's positional size was supposed to be one of his major selling points coming into the NBA draft, and during the college season, he was listed at 6'8" for the Crimson Tide, but at the combine, he measured at just 6'5" and a quarter without shoes, and that is a huge difference, and the gap was pretty surprising to me. His wingspan also came in at 6'8", which is fine, but it's not overwhelming, and it is only slightly longer than some of the guards in this class like Darius Acuff. And to be fair, Allen tested really well athletically as he posted a 42.5-inch max vertical, so the explosiveness that he has is absolutely real. But when your draft case is partly built around size and the versatility that you will bring, measuring several inches shorter than expected can definitely impact your stock, and I think it could be the deciding factor on whether or not he stays in the draft or goes back to college. But my next winner is Matt Abel from NC State, and this one's interesting as well because he's also going to have a real stay or go decision. Abel had buzz entering his freshman season with the Wolfpack, but the year itself was a bit up and down. He averaged nearly 9 points per game, so it was not a dominant freshman season like some of the others that we have in the draft, but at the Combine, he reminded teams why the upside is still there. In his first scrimmage, he scored 15 points in fewer than 20 minutes, shot 5 for 9 from the field, and hit 3 of his 5 threes, and he also looked great in his second scrimmage as well. And the shooting is definitely his separating factor, but he also showed some comfort with the ball in his hands. Now, he doesn't turn 19 until July, so teams would definitely be betting on his development if they took him in the draft, and if he stays there, I do think he could climb into the back end of the first round, but more than likely he's still going to stay in the second round conversation. Another winner from the scrimmages specifically was Baba Miller from Cincinnati, and this is a great example of a player using the Combine to get back on the NBA draft radar. Miller has always had interesting tools, but now the production and the measurements from the Combine are starting to come together. He measured 6'10.5" without shoes, with a 7'1 3/4 wingspan and a 9'3" standing reach, and that is a legitimate size that he would bring on the wing or in the front court. But what makes him different is the skill level that he has. In the first scrimmage, he led the first game in scoring with 20 points, showed inside-out versatility as he finished around the basket and hit a pair of threes. And during his season with the Bearcats, he actually averaged a double-double and added in almost 4 assists per game, which speaks to his passing feel. And he's primarily a 4-man with center height, handles, rebounding, and passing, and that's exactly the type of second-round swing teams love. But my next loser is Tyler Tanner from Vanderbilt, and I want to be careful here because I still like Tanner as a player. He was one of the best guards in college basketball this past season, and the analytics loved him for a reason, but the Combine made the NBA translation questions harder to ignore for me. He measured 5'10 3/4 barefoot with a 6'4 1/4 wingspan and came in weighing just 166.8 pounds. And there are not many NBA players that small, and even fewer who became real difference makers at the next level. Tanner also played in the scrimmage to help his case, but he did not dominate. He finished with just 13 points and 5 assists on 4 for 11 shooting, but he wasn't even the best point guard on the court in my opinion during that game. And I still think Tanner is talented, but another year at Vanderbilt and a weaker draft class next season might be the smarter play for him. And the guy that outplayed Tanner in the scrimmage is actually my next winner, and that's Jacoby Gillespie from Tennessee. And this is one of my favorite Combine stories because he did exactly what he needed to do coming into it. Gillespie is also undersized, and that was never a secret as he measured just under 6 feet with a 6'4 wingspan, but once the ball was tipped in the scrimmages, he looked like one of the best guards on the floor. He scored 24 points in the first half alone and ended up finishing with 28 points, 5 assists, and 3 steals. He shot 10 for 17 from the field and made 5 threes in that game and showed that his role at the next level is extremely clear because he is an instant offense type of guard who can shoot, pass, avoid turnovers, and compete on the defensive end. And every year it seems a productive older guard gets drafted in the second round and outplays his expectations. And right now, Gillespie feels like that guy. But someone that has slowly been slipping down my big board is my next loser, and that's Joshua Jefferson from Iowa State. And this was not the type of Combine performance that helps a borderline first rounder like Jefferson. He struggled immensely in the athletic testing as he had the slowest pro lane agility time, finished in the bottom third in vertical testing, and also landed near the bottom in sprint time and shuttle run. And that is tough when teams are trying to project how your game translates from the college to NBA level. He also did not separate himself in the shooting drills, finishing more in the middle to bottom range there as well. And now, to be fair, Jefferson was probably never going to be a testing standout, as his value definitely comes more from feel, toughness, versatility, and production on the floor. But the issue is that he also chose not to scrimmage, and when other players are helping themselves, standing still can become a loss, and I feel like that's exactly what happened with Jefferson. But my final winner is Dillon Mitchell from St. John's, and he helped himself the most during his first scrimmage as he showed he can impact a game without needing the ball. Mitchell finished as a game-high plus 17 with 7 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists, which shows that he had a near triple-double, and that is a Swiss Army knife type of stat line. And in the NBA, not every role player has to be a creator, as some teams need athletes who can defend, pass, rebound, run the floor, and connect lineups together, and that is Mitchell's pathway to the next level. But the question is whether the right front office values that skill set enough to take him in the second round. And as of right now, I think they will, because at the combine, he made that case very clear, and his athleticism, motor, passing instincts, and defensive tools give him real glue guy potential at the next level. And the final loser from the NBA draft combine to me is Allen Graves from Santa Clara, and his situation is one to closely monitor because Graves was not necessarily a major name coming into college, as he was an unheralded recruit who broke out during his redshirt freshman season with Santa Clara and played his way into real first-round conversations. But the combine didn't necessarily help his case. He finished outside the top 50 in every single agility drill, which is a problem when teams are trying to figure out athletic translation. He also did not shoot it well in the three-point drills, and that is tough because shooting is one of his strong suits in my opinion. And if he stays in the draft, teams will still like the long-term upside, especially because he is an analytics darling when you look at it. But if he decides to return to school, which I think is a bit more likely now, he could become one of the most coveted players in college basketball and get drafted a lot higher next season. But I also wanted to give a quick shout out to a few of my other winners that I had from the NBA Draft Combine, and that's Jaden Bradley from Arizona, who was definitely a difference maker in the scrimmages that he played in. You also got Jeremy Fears Jr. from Michigan State, who I think is going to go back to college, but he was one of the best guards on the floor in the scrimmages as well. Chris Sinak Jr. from Houston showed a lot with his measurements, and I think those are going to help him and jump him up a few spots in the draft. And then Alex Karabin from UConn shot it lights out in the shooting drills and should see his name called in the second round. But that wraps it up for my biggest winners and losers from this year's NBA Draft Combine. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought and who were your biggest winners and losers. Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.